N is the only rival in Pokemon history who genuinely made you question whether catching Pokemon was wrong. Not a gimmick, a real uncomfortable question. His full name is Natural Harmonia Gropius. The game barely mentions it. That detail alone tells you how much is buried underneath the surface with this character. Before Ghetsis found him, N was living in the woods, raised by wild Pokemon. No human contact, no social skills, just animals and instinct. That isolation gave him something no other trainer has. He could actually hear what Pokemon were saying, not metaphorically, literally understand their thought. Ghetsis didn't adopt N out of love. He needed a pure-hearted child who could befriend a legendary dragon. N was a tool from day one. Every Pokemon Ghetsis showed N had been abused. Deliberately, he curated N's entire worldview so the boy would grow up believing all trainers were monsters. Concordia said it plainly. N's heart is pure and innocent, but there is nothing more beautiful and terrifying than innocent. She wasn't wrong. When you first meet him in Accumula Town, he pulls you aside after Ghetsis' speech. He heard your starter Pokemon say something that stopped him cold. Your Pokemon told him it enjoyed battling with you. N had never heard that before. Every Pokemon he'd ever spoken to had only known pain. He still challenged you, still won or lost, then released his Pokemon afterward because keeping them felt wrong to him every single time. The Ferris wheel scene in Nimbasa City is where everything shifts. He invites you up, talks about engineering formulas, then drops it casually. He's the king of Team Plasma. That contrast is so deliberate. One second he's genuinely excited about circular motion mechanics. The next he's declaring ideological war. By Mistralton City, your lead Pokemon spoke to him directly. Told him it trusted you. N stood there and said if every trainer was like you, he wouldn't need liberation at all. He kept moving forward anyway. That's the part people miss. He knew the doubt was there. He buried it because the ideology was all he had. At Dragon Spiral Tower, he awakened Zekrom or Reshiram, depending on your version. Then he defeated Champion Alder before you even reached the Pokemon League. His castle literally rose from the ground and swallowed the Pokemon League. The final boss wasn't waiting at the end of a dungeon. He built his own arena. Inside that castle, you find his childhood playroom. Toys everywhere. Games, the music in that room is one of the loneliest sounds in the entire series. The final battle is two legendary dragons fighting each other. Truth against ideals. But underneath that mythology, it's just a broken kid who needed someone to tell him he mattered. After you beat him, Ghetsis walks in and calls N an inhuman monster. Freak. Tells him the whole liberation plan was always about Ghetsis ruling Unova alone. N had called him father his entire life, right up until that moment. The betrayal didn't just break his plan, it broke his entire understanding of who he was. He flew away on his legendary dragon. No dramatic speech, just gone. The farewell theme plays, and you watch him disappear into the sky, and it genuinely hurt. 2 years later, in Black 2 and White 2, he comes back, not as a king, as someone who spent 2 years actually listening to Pokemon across the world. He shows up at Giant Chasm to stop Ghetsis from using Kyurem as a weapon. He still calls Ghetsis father. Ghetsis rejects him again, without hesitation. After everything, N gives you his legendary dragon. That's the full arc. From Pokemon shouldn't be with humans to trusting you with the most powerful one he knew. Concordia said his heart was pure and innocent. Ghetsis tried to weaponize that. The player proved it could survive. N is the only character in the series where all three things are true at once. N used a completely different Pokemon team in every single battle, not reusing a single one. That's a philosophy made into a mechanic. He couldn't justify keeping them. Every battle was borrowing, not owning. The game quietly made his ideology visible through his roster choices alone. There's a contradiction nobody talks about enough. N used Pokeballs, the very thing he called oppression. He knew it. It visibly troubled him every time. At Chargestone Cave, he confronted Professor Juniper directly about the Pokédex, cataloging Pokemon like specimens in a jar. He found it genuinely disgusting. What's strange is he wasn't entirely wrong. The Pokédex does reduce living creatures to data entries. N just couldn't see the care that existed alongside the science. His speech pattern is unique in the entire series, faster than any other character. The game's coded that deliberately to suggest a mind that never fully slows down. Fans have long read N as neurodivergent, the hyperfocus on math, the social disconnection, the inability to process emotional nuance without literal Pokemon translation. The game never labels it. It just shows you. A kid who understands animals better than people, who finds engineering formulas genuinely beautiful, who struggles with gray areas. Champion Alder tried to warn him, told N he was being used. N heard it, acknowledged it might be true, and kept walking toward Dragon Spiral Tower anyway. That moment is the most honest thing the game does. N wasn't brainwashed into ignoring doubt. He chose ideology over doubt because doubt had nowhere to land. His quote from Charged Stone Cave is worth sitting with. Many different values mixed together, and the world becomes gray. That is unforgivable. He needed clean lines to survive. Gray was dangerous to him, because gray meant Getsys might have lied, and if Getsys lied, N had no identity left. The ideology wasn't a belief, it was a foundation. After the final battle, he said something quiet, that he'd seen many Pokemon who looked happy with their trainers during his journey. He'd been collecting evidence against himself the whole time. In Black 2 and White 2, Team Plasma fractured. Half stayed loyal to N's original ideals, half followed the new Plasma, which was just Getsys' domination scheme with different branding. N's faction, the ones who actually believed in liberation, ended up opposing the very organization he built. His legacy split in two, just like the original dragon did. When Getsys fused Kurum with N's legendary dragon at Giant Chasm, N heard the Pokemon's pain directly. He heard it scream and couldn't stop it. That's the cruelest thing Getsys ever did to him, not the verbal abuse. Using N's own gift, his ability to hear Pokemon, to make him witness suffering he couldn't prevent. After the Giant Chasm battle, Getsys suffered a mental breakdown. The man who had controlled everything, who had engineered a king from a lost child, simply collapsed, and watched it happen. The monster who raised him reduced to nothing. There's no record of what N felt in that moment. The game leaves it completely silent. Every Friday in Black 2 and White 2, N returns to the Nimbasa Ferris wheel, the same place he revealed everything. He battles you with a seasonal team and just talks. That detail is small, and it matters enormously. He keeps coming back to the place where he first told the truth, like he's still working something out. His final quote in Black and White points somewhere beyond the games. One day, even without Pokeballs, people and Pokemon can trust each other. He didn't abandon the dream, he refined it. He fell not from grace but from a lie, and he climbed back up on his own. No other character in the series carries that full weight. Victim, villain, believer, and survivor. All four at once without the game ever asking you to pick just one. The reason N still gets talked about 15 years later is simple. He made you feel something the game had no obligation to make you feel. That's the whole thing. N was 20 years old during the events of Black and White. Most players assume he's a teenager. That gap matters because he was already an adult choosing this path. His legendary dragon wasn't just a power move. In Unova mythology, only someone whose heart matched the dragon's nature could awaken it. Getsys built N specifically for that lock. The ancient brothers who split the original dragon apart were trying to build a perfect world too. N wasn't just echoing their conflict, he was repeating it, beat for beat. Getsys designed his own battle team specifically to counter N's type weaknesses. He wasn't protecting N, he was making sure N could never beat him if things went wrong. That detail reframes every moment Getsys called N his son. The man was running contingency plans against a child he raised. The warmth was always a costume. N told the player directly. Separating people and Pokemon who genuinely cared for each other did break his heart a little. He said it out loud, then kept going. That line is the whole tragedy compressed. He knew what he was destroying. He just believed the ideology demanded it. Belief that costs you something is the most dangerous kind. And in his quiet moments, N wrestled with a growing doubt. His carefully constructed ideology fracturing with every shared glance between trainer and Pokemon. He never told Getsys about those exceptions. Whether that was fear or protection is unclear. The game doesn't say. That silence is one of the most loaded gaps in the story. The music that plays during the final battle is called N's Farewell. It starts before he loses. The game was already grieving him while the fight was still happening. His quote from that moment, "Even if I lose, is it different from the future I saw?" He wasn't asking the player. He was asking himself whether any of it was real. The castle becoming ruins in Black 2 and White 2 isn't just set dressing. It's underground now. N's ideology didn't vanish. It got buried under the weight of what it cost. When he hands over his legendary dragon at those ruins, he's not giving up on Pokemon. He's trusting the player to carry something he no longer needs to hold alone. The player character in Black and White is described by Getsys as a neutral presence. Neither pure truth nor pure ideals. That's exactly why N couldn't predict them or dismiss them. N needed the world to be binary. The player existing outside that binary was the crack in the foundation long before the final battle ever started. Bianca and Sharon both grew through their journeys in ways N couldn't. They had room to be wrong. N had been told from childhood that doubt was a failure of purity. One thing the games never resolve, whether N ever found other humans he trusted after Getsys. The Friday Ferris wheel visits suggest he kept trying. That's not nothing. He called Getsy's father again at Giant Chasm. After everything. That's not weakness. That's what happens when someone is the only parent you ever had, no matter what they did. Getsy's called him schizophrenic for hearing Pokemon. The ability Getsy spent years exploiting, he weaponized as an insult the moment it stopped being useful to him. N's arc across both games is essentially this: a person learning that love and harm can come from the same source, and choosing to keep loving anyway. That's not simple. The split dragon myth ends with neither truth nor ideals winning. Both are needed. N spent the entire game trying to eliminate one side. The mythology was arguing against him the whole time. Game Freak gave N a last name nobody uses, a first name nobody says, and a childhood nobody witnessed. Everything about him is designed to feel like something you're only partly seeing. He told the player he wanted to see things no one else could see. The truth of being a trainer. He got that. It just wasn't the answer he was built to accept. N just happened to be the only one listening. He didn't get a clean ending. He got a real one. Still traveling, still uncertain, still returning to that Ferris wheel. Some characters finish their arc. N just keeps living his. N's quote about Pokeballs cuts deep. As long as Pokemon are trapped in a Pokeball, they cannot be perfect. He said this while actively carrying Pokeballs. He knew. That contradiction wasn't hypocrisy. It was the gap between what he believed and what the world actually gave him to work with. He had no other tools. The gym leaders in Black and White weren't passive. Alesa, Berg, Skyla, they actively pushed back against Team Plasma's ideology throughout the story. N noticed every one of them. He processed their resistance the same way he processed everything, as data. More trainers who didn't fit his model. More evidence he was quietly filing away against himself. Something fans rarely clock. N never once lied to the player. Every revelation, every confession, every doubt, he said it directly. Getsy lied constantly. N just told the truth badly. His relationship with Anthea and Concordia is strange and sad. They raised him, protected him, and couldn't save him. They knew what Getsy's was doing and had no power to stop it. They stayed anyway. That's the part that lingers. 3 children trapped in the same castle. Each one a tool, each one trying to make the other's captivity slightly softer. N's battle theme shifts depending on where you fight him. Early encounters feel uncertain, almost searching. The final battle version is fully orchestrated. The music grew up with him. That musical progression is one of the most deliberate things Game Freak did with this character. His theme doesn't just accompany the story, it tracks his psychological state in real time. After the credits roll in Black and White, Professor Juniper's father mentions N briefly. He calls him a young man searching for something. That's the entire post-game summary of his arc. One line. That's all N gets after everything. The game doesn't wrap him up. It just lets him keep moving, somewhere off screen, still looking. His name itself is a mathematical variable. N. Unknown quantity. Placeholder for something not yet solved. Game Freak named him that on purpose, and it's almost too on the nose. The Unova region was modeled on New York City, a place built on clashing ideals, constant motion, people from everywhere. N wanted to burn that complexity down to 2 clean categories. He couldn't have chosen a worse region to test his binary worldview. Unova was designed to be messy. The setting itself argued against him before the player ever did. In Black 2 and White 2, Hugh's rage toward Team Plasma is the emotional counterweight to N's idealism. Hugh lost a Pokemon to Plasma Grunts. His anger is personal, not philosophical. N and Hugh never share a scene, but they represent the same failure from opposite direction. One believed too much, one was hurt too much. Neither could see the middle. Getsy's forced together what the ancient brothers tore apart. N heard the fusion happen from the inside. That's not a metaphor. He was standing there, gift fully active, listening to a legendary Pokemon scream as its body was rewritten. Iris, the champion of Black 2 and White 2, grew up around dragons. She understood them the way N understood all Pokemon. The game quietly put 2 listeners in the same story. They never compare notes. But Iris beating the new Plasma, while N dismantles the old one, creates a parallel the game never announces. It just lets it sit there. N's castle had training rooms, strategy halls, and a throne. Everything except a front door you could leave through freely. It was a palace built to keep one person in. The throne itself is worth a second look. It's enormous, clearly built for authority. N sat in it as a child. That's like handing a 10-year-old the controls of a commercial aircraft and calling it a promotion. What N actually wanted, stripped of ideology, was simple. He wanted Pokemon to stop hurting. That's it. Getsy's handed him a crown when what he needed was a door out of the woods. The tragedy isn't that he was wrong. It's that the core of what he wanted was right. Pokemon shouldn't suffer. He just built a catastrophic structure around a true thing. He's still out there, by every account the games give, traveling, Listening, returning to that Ferris wheel, still the most unfinished sentence in the entire series. N's Nacrene City encounter gets skipped over constantly. He showed up outside a museum housing a legendary dragon fossil and said nothing about it. He already knew what was inside. That visit wasn't coincident. He was mapping the region's legendary sites long before Dragon Spiral Tower. The whole journey was reconnaissance dressed as rivalry. His Vanillux, Klinklang, Zoroark, the Pokemon he used in the final battle were all wild-caught specifically for that fight, then released. He built a team for one moment and let it go. That's a level of discipline most players never clock. He didn't train them for weeks. He found them, earned their trust fast enough to battle, then freed them. Every time. The Seven Sages treated N like a figurehead. They ran logistics, wrote speeches, coordinated grunts. N gave the ideology its face. They gave it its teeth. He didn't fully control his own movement, which means the Liberation Crusade that bore his name was never fully his. He was the symbol. Ghetsis was the engine. N didn't lead Team Plasma. He fronted it. His room in the castle had a basketball hoop, a chessboard, a merry-go-round. Ghetsis gave him toys instead of freedom. It's the oldest trick in the book. Make the cage comfortable enough that the prisoner stops testing the bars. He beat the Elite Four's champion before the player ever arrived. That's not a cutscene detail. Alder was the strongest trainer in Unova and N walked through him. And then he waited. He had won. He could have acted immediately. Instead, he built the castle around the league and waited for the player to arrive. He needed to be challenged. That waiting is the tell. He didn't want to win unopposed. He wanted someone to prove him wrong badly enough to fight him for it. The player was the only candidate he respected. In the Unova myth, the hero who summoned the dragon had to carry truth or ideals in their heart without contradiction. N carried both, which is exactly why the dragon accepted him and why he was always going to lose. The player carried the opposite dragon, two halves of the same original creature, fighting again. The myth wasn't background lore. It was the plot, running underneath everything. After Black and White, Game Freak never gave N a definitive answer. No sequel confirmed where he went. No spin-off resolved it. The ambiguity is the point, and also genuinely frustrating. What the games do confirm is that he kept traveling. Different climates, different regions, different Pokemon. He was doing empirically what he'd refused to do ideologically, collecting real evidence. His quote from the very first meeting has a line most people forget. I want to see a future where all Pokemon will be perfect, not free. Perfect. That word choice was always the problem. Perfection is a closed system that has no room for growth, for surprise, for the kind of bond that develops over time. N wanted to freeze the world into an ideal rather than let it live. The player never says a word in the entire game. Silent protagonist. And yet N treats every encounter like a real conversation. He was always talking to someone he imagined could understand him. That dynamic makes the relationship stranger and sadder than it looks. N poured genuine feeling into a one-sided exchange for the entire game. The player's silence wasn't indifference. It was a mirror. His post-game arc in Black 2 and White 2 ends without ceremony. No speech. He hands over the stone, says something quiet about trust, and walks back into the ruins alone. The ruins swallowed his castle. His ideology collapsed. His father was gone. And he just kept walking. That's not closure. That's someone learning to live without the structure that defined them. Every character in Black and White has a clean resolution except him. Charon becomes a gym leader. Bianca works for Juniper. N gets a direction and no destination. Deliberately, his freedom is a quiet rebellion, constant recalculation. He seeks not to return to a past confession, but to forge a future free from inherited chains. He told the player he wanted to see things no one else could see. He got exactly that. He just didn't get to choose what those things would teach him. He asked what Pokemon actually want. He was the only one in the entire series built to hear the answer. That question is still open. So is he. Around 22 during Black 2 and White 2, N had aged into something quieter, not softer, just less certain that certainty was the point. His first quote after returning isn't about liberation, it's about listening. He'd spent 2 years doing the thing Ghetsis never let him do, just watching without an agenda. The Plasma Grunts who stayed loyal to his original ideals didn't follow him back. They kept the white uniforms and the speeches. N had moved past both. He never issued a formal statement dissolving Team Plasma. He just stopped being king. The organization fractured around the absence of him, not because of anything he said. That silence was its own kind of leadership. Or the end of it. Hard to tell with N, which is exactly the point. His relationship with the player character is the only human bond the games show him choosing freely. Every other connection was assigned to him by Ghetsis. He chose to ride the Ferris wheel with them, chose to keep showing up, chose to hand over the dragon. Small decisions, but they were his. The dragon he gave away had awakened specifically for him. No other person in Unova could have called it. Handing it to the player was handing over the only proof he had ever mattered. What he got in return wasn't a gift. It was a witness. Someone who had seen everything and stayed anyway. For N, that was probably worth more. His idealism shattered. N's subsequent journey was a desperate search for truth beyond the manipulative grasp of Getsys, a path only he could forge. Most fallen figures in fiction stay fallen. N got back up and kept moving, which is the part the mythology doesn't usually include. His gift for hearing Pokemon was never explained scientifically. The games don't try. It's just true. The way some things about a person are just true. That gift is also what made Getsys' abuse so precise. He didn't just manipulate a child. He manipulated a child who could feel every Pokemon's pain directly. The cruelty wasn't accidental. Getsys understood exactly what N could perceive and built a curriculum around it. That's not neglect, that's engineering. And yet N never became cruel. That's the thing about him that resists easy explanation. Everything Getsys built pointed toward bitterness. N landed somewhere else entirely. He landed on grief, mostly, and a question he couldn't stop asking. What do Pokemon actually want? Not what trainers want for them, what they want. That question is still open. The games never answer it definitively. N just kept asking it in every region he traveled through, which might be the only honest response to it. He's the only character in the series whose arc is explicitly unfinished by design, not forgotten, left open. There's a difference, and Game Freak knew it. The Ferris wheel keeps the story breathing. Every Friday he comes back, not to relitigate the past, just to be somewhere that knew him before everything broke. That image, a person returning weekly to the place where they first told the truth, says more about recovery than any speech the game could have written him. He saw humanity's darkness, stark contrast to his gentle upbringing. This harsh revelation fractured his worldview, leaving him adrift in a sea of despair. The fallen angel of the Pokemon universe didn't fall because he was corrupt. He fell because someone handed him a cause before he was old enough to choose one. Surviving that is the arc. Not winning. Not being right. Just coming out the other side, still capable of handing someone a dragon and meaning it. His journey continues, seeking solace. He still grapples with his past, learning from every encounter. A constant evolution. If N's story means something to you, share this video. Someone else out there is still thinking about him too. They just haven't found the right words yet.